Hello, my name is Avon, and the day my husband won $30 million, he told me to pack my things and get out. No warning, no goodbye, just a suitcase, a shattered promise, and a headline that called me the ex who didn't know her place. But what hurt more wasn't the money. It was realizing that everyone, my family, his family, even my best friend, had seen it coming and stayed silent. They took my house, my dog, even my wedding album. But what if I told you they didn't take everything? What if the one thing I hid is the one thing they never saw coming? I stepped onto the street with nowhere to go, and no one waiting. The suitcase I dragged behind me rattled over every crack in the pavement, loud enough to make me wince with each step. It was an old Samsonite, a hand-me-down from my dad, just like the photo frame pressed against my chest, the only thing I hadn't left behind. Everything else, furniture, books, 20 years of marriage, was inside that house I no longer had a key to. The sun was dipping low, painting the Sacramento sky in soft oranges. I could still hear the door slam behind me, sharp and final. I didn't have a plan, not really. I had friends once, but over the years, I'd let most of them drift away. Corwin didn't like me going out much. "What do you even talk to them about?" he'd asked once, more annoyed than curious. I never had a good answer. I walked for almost an hour before my feet begged for mercy. I found a cheap motel just off Florin Road. The sign flickered, half-lit. Monthly rates available. Inside, the air smelled like bleach and desperation. The front desk guy didn't ask questions, just slid a key across the counter with a nod. I paid cash. That was all I had left. The room was dim, furnished with threadbare curtains and a carpet that looked like it hadn't been vacuumed since the Obama administration. I set the photo frame down gently on the nightstand. It was of my dad and me, standing outside our first home. I must have been 10, still all knees and elbows, but grinning like I'd just won the world. I sat down on the edge of the bed, still in shock. You hear about stories like this? Husbands walking out, divorces served cold, but you never think it'll be you. I mean, we had problems. Who doesn't? But this wasn't a marriage ending. This was an execution. 2 days ago, Corwin walked into the kitchen, face flushed. "You're not gonna believe this," he said, voice trembling. "I won. The lottery. 30 million. I dropped the spatula right there on the floor. For a second, we both laughed. I cried into his chest. We danced, like fools, right there in our socks. That same night, he suggested we speak to a lawyer. "Just to protect both of us," he said. "It's smart. Things like this, they change people. Not you and me, of course. But it's good to be prepared." I didn't even read the paper he gave me. I just signed it. I trusted him. Now I was sitting in a motel room, flipping channels I didn't care about, staring at a wall that wasn't mine, in a life that suddenly wasn't mine either. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Vera, my older sister. I'd texted her earlier, just, "Corwin kicked me out." She finally replied, "What did you do to him? Not are you okay? Not where are you? Just that." I turned the phone face down. The next morning, I returned to the house, hoping to grab a few more things, my wedding ring, my grandmother's quilt, my journals. I barely stepped onto the porch before I heard the locks click. Corwin opened the door just wide enough to speak. "You're not allowed here anymore," he said flatly. "I just need a few things." He shook his head. "You already took what was yours." "I paid the down payment on this house," I said, my voice shaking. "That was my father's inheritance." He shrugged. "You told me to put it in my name. That makes it mine." That sentence, So casual, so dismissive, it cracked something inside me. I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I just turned and walked away. Back at the motel, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. I didn't recognize her. The woman looking back at me had hollows under her eyes, lips pressed so tight they were nearly invisible. I whispered, "Get up," like a prayer, like a command. That night, I made a list. I didn't know what for yet. Just a list of things I still had. A suitcase, a photo, my name. My name. He couldn't take that. I lay down on the stiff mattress and pulled the scratchy blanket over my shoulders. I hadn't cried yet. Not really. I was afraid that if I started, I wouldn't be able to stop. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. I was still breathing, still standing. They say, when you lose everything, that's when you find out who you really are. I intended to find out. I didn't sleep that night. I lay still in that scratchy motel bed, staring at the textured ceiling, trying not to cry. But when dawn cracked open the sky, I felt something shift inside me. Not hope, God no, not yet, but maybe resolve. I got up, dressed, and took a slow walk to a nearby diner, the kind with cracked red booths and sticky syrup bottles. I ordered black coffee and a slice of dry toast. My stomach was in no mood for anything else. I needed answers, or at least something that resembled the truth. So I called Isolde, Corwin's mother. She answered on the second ring. "Avon?" she said, as if she hadn't deleted me from her life like junk mail. I paused. I needed to talk. About what happened. About Corwin. There was a long silence on her end before she said, "We tried to warn him. He finally listened." I blinked. "Warn him about what?" She sighed. "Sweetheart, you never really fit into our world. I think even you knew that. Corwin needed someone who saw his potential." "And you think Valora does?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. She didn't answer that. Instead, she said, "We all knew this would happen sooner or later." That was it. So no sympathy, no regret, just confirmation that I had never been one of them. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. I stepped outside the diner and leaned against the brick wall, the cold air slapping my cheeks awake. My phone buzzed, a message from a number I didn't recognize. When I opened it, I felt like I'd been kicked in the chest. It was a group message, clearly sent to the wrong thread. A dinner party invite. From Valora, at Corwin's new penthouse. I clicked her name, and sure enough, there she was, arms around Corwin, both beaming like the perfect couple. Their outfits matched. The caption read, "Celebrating new beginnings with the love of my life." My hands trembled, but not from the cold. I scrolled. And there it was, picture after picture of them at places Corwin and I used to love. The Italian place with the garlic knots he swore were better than his mother's. The jazz lounge I used to drag him to on Fridays. All of it, now theirs. I didn't even realize I was crying until a tear slid into my mouth, salty, humiliating. Valora had been my friend, my bridesmaid, my late-night confidant. She'd once helped me pick out my wedding shoes and told me, "If he ever hurts you, I'll kick his ass myself." What a joke. The next day, I passed a cafe we used to frequent, and on impulse, I stepped inside. The place smelled the same, fresh ground beans, cinnamon scones, but the faces were different, younger, glossier. No one looked up. No one smiled. I approached the counter. A girl with bright blue hair glanced at me. "First time here?" she asked. I stared at her, then around the room. "No," I said quietly, "but it feels like it." I sat in the corner with a lukewarm latte, watching the door like someone might walk in and tell me it was all a mistake, that I'd imagined the betrayal, that Corwin would be here any minute, holding a bouquet, apologizing, saying, "Let's go home." But no one came. Later that evening, I returned to the motel and opened my photo gallery. I started deleting pictures, one by one. Me and Valora at the beach. Gone. Corwin holding my hand on our 5th anniversary. Gone. Valora asleep on my couch after one too many glasses of wine. Gone. Then I came across a photo I couldn't quite delete. It was the night we celebrated my dad's birthday. Valora had planned it as a surprise. My dad wore that silly paper crown she insisted on, and we all laughed until we cried. It was the last photo I had of him smiling like that. I hovered over the delete button, thumb trembling, but I didn't press it. Not yet. Those words pulled me back from the edge and reminded me who I really was. The message had been sitting there, buried in my old Gmail inbox, set to send on my birthday by my father before he passed. "You are not invisible, Avon, not to me." I read it 3 times, as if seeing it once might not be enough to believe it. The rain outside had turned steady, tapping against the thin windows of the rented apartment. I sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, each one filled with reminders of a life that used to be mine. I reached for the notebook that had somehow made it through the eviction, a spiral-bound thing I used to keep in the kitchen junk drawer. Inside were scribbled to-do lists, half-finished recipes, and sketches of furniture placements. But deeper into the pages, I found what I hadn't remembered: outlines of our home, diagrams with paint swatches stapled to the corners, notes in the margin like, "Corwin prefers grays, but the warm tones feel more inviting." I had planned every inch of that house. "I picked the tile in that kitchen," I whispered, tracing one sketch. "I chose the cabinets. I mapped out the lighting, the traffic flow. I made that place livable." And he took it, like he'd always owned it. A clap of thunder shook the window pane. I didn't flinch. Instead, I opened my laptop and drafted a message to Corwin's new assistant, his third, I guessed, since the lottery win. I kept it short and polite. "There is one item I'd like returned if possible. A leather-bound wedding album, handmade by my late father. Please let me know if it was preserved." I hit send and stared at the screen for a long while. The next morning, I received the reply. "Per Mr. Halden's instructions, all jointly held property has either been discarded or digitized for archival purposes. No physical copy of the item you describe is currently in our records." I read that twice, too, then a third time, just to be sure I hadn't missed something. Later that day, I made the mistake of checking Valora's Instagram. It was a habit I kept trying to break. She'd posted a story, a casual snapshot from behind their house, something mundane. But in the background, blurred but unmistakable, was the wedding album. The frame I'd helped my father glue together, the one with the brass edges and leather trim, sitting in a pile of junk next to their outdoor garbage bins. I stared at that image until the story expired. I didn't message her. I didn't scream. Instead, I walked to the closet and pulled out a box of photos I'd managed to save. Underneath the faded Polaroids and Christmas cards was a folded piece of paper, the receipt from the day we bought the first lottery ticket. And then it all came rushing back. That night had been ordinary in every way. Corwin had come home late, complaining about his supervisor. I was simmering lentil soup, listening to the news on low volume. We'd joked about the lottery when the numbers were announced on TV. I had said, "What the heck?" and pulled a scrap of paper from my planner. "Use Dad's birthday," I'd suggested, and our old house number, and the date we met. He'd smiled, kissed my forehead, and walked to the corner gas station. I hadn't even asked to see the ticket afterward. The memory made me nauseous. I curled up on the living room rug, if you could call it that. The fibers were stiff, scratchy, nothing like the plush one Corwin used to complain about me vacuuming too often. I pressed the only photo I had of my father to my chest, trying not to sob. I gave him everything, I muttered. The numbers, the stability, the design, the encouragement. I built him. And what had I kept? Silence answered. I wiped my eyes and looked around the room. I didn't have the house. I didn't have the money. I didn't even have the album. But I had this truth now, that I'd been the one to hand him the future he now flaunted like a trophy. I wasn't a side character in his success story. I had been the architect. The anger didn't come in a storm. It crept in like fog, cold and consuming. But beneath it was something sturdier, a root that hadn't been yanked from the soil yet, me. But in that fog, I remembered something no one else could take, my name, my voice, and a truth they'd buried under all that wealth and PR polish. They didn't make me invisible. They just turned away. A few mornings later, I was standing in line at the public library, the only place nearby with working printers and free Wi-Fi. I needed to print my resume, not because I believed I'd land a job in that state, but because doing something gave my hands purpose. It was raining again, the kind that doesn't roar but lingers, soaking into your bones. As I waited for the pages to finish printing, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A Google alert. My heart sank. I didn't even have to open it to know. The headline read, "Dumped after the jackpot, the ex who didn't know her place." Underneath was a photo of me from years ago, cropped awkwardly and paired with a zoomed-in screenshot of Corwin and Valora laughing at a wine bar. The article painted me as some clingy has-been, someone who got lucky being married to a man with potential. The comments section was worse. She should have been grateful he stuck with her that long. Gold digger lost her grip. Boo-hoo. What did she expect? Look at her. Basic. I shut my phone off mid-scroll. My palms were sweating, though the room was cold. I packed my things quickly, barely remembering to grab the USB from the side of the computer tower. As I left the library, I kept my head down, hoping no one in the building had seen the article. Not that it mattered. When the internet decides who you are, there's no explaining yourself. You're just a headline and a punchline. Later that week, I sat in a corner booth at Charlie's Diner, the kind of place people forget still exists. The kind with laminated menus and waitresses who call everyone hun. I nursed a coffee, scrolling aimlessly. I didn't expect to see Pongo, our dog, but there he was in Valora's new story. She'd posted a video of him chasing a ball in the backyard, the same backyard I'd designed. His fur looked a little grayer, but he still had that goofy gait. She tagged it, "He loves his new mommy." I swallowed hard. My hand trembled as I tapped open a private message to her. "Can I see him?" Just once. I raised him. 7 years. She didn't reply for hours. Then, just before sunset, I got one line back. "Fine. 10 minutes. Public place. Don't make a scene." We met outside a strip mall parking lot the next morning. She drove up in a leased luxury SUV, the kind Corwin used to roll his eyes at. The passenger door swung open and Pongo hopped out, tail wagging. I crouched down, calling his name softly. He approached, sniffed my hand, and licked it once. I smiled until she snapped her fingers. "Pongo, here." He paused. Then he turned and trotted back to her like he'd never known another home. I stood. My knees felt unsteady. Valora smirked, pushing her sunglasses up her nose. "You're lucky I even replied," she said. "Not everyone would." "I didn't come to talk to you," I said quietly. She laughed. "Still clinging to old things? You should really let go. It's embarrassing." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat had gone dry. She drove off without saying goodbye. That night, I returned to the apartment and pulled out an old phone, one I hadn't used in a while but had kept just for sentimental junk. I scrolled through the saved voice memos. There was one, labeled Late Thursday, Just Us. I pressed play. Corwin's voice came through, muffled by the kitchen fan. Even if we had nothing, he'd said, I'd still want to wake up next to you. You get that, right? I deleted it before it finished. Just like that. Later, I sat in a little cafe near the corner of 16th and L Street. I used to come there with Corwin before his meetings. The staff had changed. The tables had new tabletops. But the smell, fresh espresso and cinnamon, was still familiar. The barista asked if I wanted room for cream. I shook my head. First time here? She asked. I looked at her, then around the room. No, I said. But it doesn't matter. I took my coffee to a window seat. People came and went, their lives moving forward while mine had folded in on itself. My reflection in the glass was blurry from the steam, but I could still make out my eyes. Even the dog forgot me, and that's when I knew. I had to draw the line somewhere. It started with a phone call I should have never made. I was sitting on the floor of my rental unit, the morning sun barely cutting through the bent blinds, and I told myself that reaching out to Vera was about connection, about closure. But deep down, I think I just wanted to hear someone say, I didn't deserve this. The line rang 3 times before she picked up. Avon? Her voice was clipped, as if she had to strain just to say my name. I'm not calling to dump anything on you, I said quickly. I guess I wanted to check in, see if maybe we could talk. It's been hard, and You should be glad someone like Corwin ever married you. Her words landed like a slap. I let out a soft, stunned breath. She kept going, voice sharper now, like she'd been waiting to say it. You always needed so much. Too soft, too emotional. You made things harder than they had to be. I blinked, mouth dry. I was married to him for over a decade. And what do you have to show for it? She snapped. I'm not calling to argue, Vera. She laughed, cold and brittle. Then don't drag the family name into your drama. Before I could say anything more, the line went dead. I didn't cry. Not this time. I just sat there, phone still in hand, staring at the spot on the wall where my framed degree used to hang. Before I lost the job that came with it, before the marriage, before all of it. A knock came that afternoon. The building's mailboxes didn't lock right, so the carrier always brought things to our doors. Package for Avon Blythe, the man said. He handed over a plain white envelope. I thanked him, shut the door, and stared at the return address. There was none, but I knew exactly what it was. A week earlier, I'd sent Corwin a small card, just something simple, no handwriting beyond, Happy Anniversary, I hope you're well, no signature, no return address. It wasn't about reconnecting, it was about letting go on my terms. And here it was, unopened, marked with a red stamp. Return to sender, recipient unknown. I held it for a while, sitting on the edge of the bed, the silence of the room humming in my ears. Then I took it to the kitchen, lit a match, and watched the paper curl and blacken over the sink. I didn't cry, but I did watch every letter disappear like it owed me something. That evening, I began pulling out every old folder, envelope, and receipt I had. I organized things into piles, mortgage records, utility bills, proof of deposits. A map of every contribution I'd ever made to that house. And then, buried under a stack of scribbled recipes and old grocery lists, I found it. A napkin, folded 4 times, edges browned from age and friction. On it, in my handwriting, was a sketch of the floor plan for the house we built together. Our house. It had notes scribbled beside it. Move kitchen island 8 inches left, and skylight above reading nook. Corwin had used that napkin when meeting with the contractor. I remember it vividly. He joked about me playing architect, said, "You should have gone into design instead of education." Then he tucked it into his folder and never handed it back. And now he lived in a space I dreamed into reality, calling it his vision in interviews. I ran my fingers over the faded ink. My chest tightened, not with grief this time, but with something steadier. I was done mourning. I was done letting other people decide what pieces of me they could take and what they could toss. I whispered to the empty room, "You can take the house, but you don't get the blueprint of who I am." And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel erased. That night, I began gathering what they thought I'd buried. It started with me scrolling Zillow out of habit, a late-night ritual I developed somewhere between insomnia and self-punishment. I told myself I was just looking, just passing time. But deep down, I knew I was hoping to see something I recognized, something that used to belong to me. Then I found it. There, featured in a glossy real estate write-up, was a listing for a property described as elegantly modern with touches of timeless comfort. The photos loaded slowly, one by one. I stopped breathing after the third. The open staircase, the exposed beams, the garden path lined with river stones, bordered by low hedges. Even the color of the exterior trim, storm gray with ivory accents, was mine. I had it all sketched in an old notebook, once stored in our hallway drawer. I clicked to expand the images. Every detail screamed my handwriting. The cozy reading nook under the skylight, the recessed lighting we argued about for weeks, the curved backsplash tile I had to special order after Corwin said it was too feminine. Now it was praised as a bold statement in domestic design. I closed the browser tab, then opened it again. I needed to be sure. At the bottom of the listing, I saw their names. Property designed and curated by Corwin Halden and Valora Quinn. I let out a sound I didn't recognize, half laugh, half groan. I took a screenshot and saved it in a folder titled, "They Lied." By noon the next day, the article was circulating on social media, reposted by real estate bloggers and interior design fan pages. The post had hundreds of likes, dozens of comments. Such vision. Modern fairy tale. I couldn't resist. My fingers hovered over the comment box, pulse steady but my jaw clenched. Finally, I typed, "Looks familiar? Hope the foundation holds better than the marriage." I hit post and set my phone face down. It didn't take long. Valora replied in less than an hour, publicly. "Some people only contribute scraps and want credit for the castle." Sad, really. My stomach turned. I remembered that tone, that exact phrasing. She'd said something like that once at brunch, after Corwin and I had gotten into a small disagreement about money. "You're the kind of woman men settle with before they find who they really want," she'd whispered over mimosas, smiling wide. Back then, I laughed it off. She claimed she was quoting some book. I was too naive to call her out. Now, she'd built a life out of pieces I left behind. I wasn't just grieving the marriage anymore. I was grieving my ideas, my work, repurposed, renamed, and polished until it looked like it never came from me. That afternoon, I cleared the kitchen table and spread out every scrap I had left. Receipts for paint samples, handwritten emails about plumbing estimates, screenshots of text exchanges where I proposed design changes, even a paper napkin with the initial floor plan sketch. My handwriting still smudged in one corner from when I spilled coffee on it mid-idea. I snapped photos of everything and organized it into folders. One for the house, one for finances, One labeled simply, Valora. I didn't have a legal plan, not yet. But I was building my case, not for a courtroom, maybe not even for the public, but for myself. I needed to remember that I'd built something real, that I wasn't imagining my contributions, my vision, my place. And if they thought I was going to sit quietly and let them paint over me, they were wrong. I opened my sketchbook, the one I used to jot ideas in back when we still thought the world was on our side. I flipped to the back and found an unfinished drawing, an elevation of the living room, angled to catch the morning light through the windows. Below it, in the margins, I'd scribbled, north-facing, warm light until 10:30 a.m., best for coffee, best for writing, best for breathing. I stared at that line for a long time. You wanted to steal a house, I said aloud, voice calm now. I'll show you what happens when you steal a legacy. I stayed up that night organizing folders on my computer, each one labeled like a legal brief. Home design, financial contributions, text logs. I barely noticed the time passing. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you too aware of your own breathing. I wasn't tired, I was focused, clear for the first time in weeks. The next morning, I made coffee and sat by the window with my laptop balanced on my knees. I needed a break, something to distract me, so I opened Facebook. That's when I saw it. It autoplayed, no warning. A live stream titled Celebrating Love, Valora plus Corwin beamed across my screen. I hesitated, thumb hovering. Curiosity won. They were getting married. That day, the camera panned across a vineyard drenched in late afternoon sunlight. Guests in designer dresses, champagne flutes clinking, string quartet playing something light and familiar. It took a second, but then I recognized it. The place, the song, it was our vineyard, the one Corwin and I had visited 6 years ago. I'd wanted to renew our vows there on our 10th anniversary. I'd even written it in my dream journal. Sunset over the vines, string quartet, just us and those who matter. I hadn't told anyone else but Corwin, and apparently Valora. And that song? That wasn't just any love song. It was our song, the one I'd recorded on a playlist titled Our Forever. He used to play it in the kitchen when we slow danced barefoot after dinner. I watched Valora glide down the aisle in a champagne-colored gown, her smile stretched just a little too wide. Corwin waited at the end, stiff in a tux he never would have worn before he got rich. The officiant said something about second chances, and the chat exploded with hearts and fire emojis. Finally, with the right woman. The glow-up is real. Money finds money. I closed the laptop. Hard. And then I screamed, not polite sobbing, not trembling lips and quiet tears. No, this was guttural, ripped straight from my ribs. I screamed like every lie, every betrayal, every stolen moment had lodged in my chest and was now tearing its way out. When the silence returned, it was heavier. I paced the room for half an hour, then grabbed my coat and walked out. I didn't even know where I was going until I found myself standing in front of Vera's house. I hadn't seen her in weeks. The siding needed repainting, the porch light flickered, and the same ceramic frog still sat lopsided in the garden. Everything looked just like it always had, except I didn't. I knocked. Vera opened the door halfway, arms crossed like a gatekeeper. I need to see Callan, I said. She doesn't need to be involved in your pity parade, Vera shot back. She's not a pawn, I replied. And this isn't about you. She's 16. She's impressionable. You showing up here, acting like a victim, it's not helping her. I bit my tongue, then stepped back. Fine, I'll wait outside. She scoffed and slammed the door. I stood there for a few minutes, unsure what to do. Then I heard a soft tapping above me. Callan was at her bedroom window, pushing it open. She waved, then held up a folded piece of notebook paper. A string dangled from the corner, her old trick for sneaking notes in middle school. I walked closer and caught the end, careful not to tug too hard. When I unfolded it, I recognized her handwriting immediately. "I remember everything too," it read. Underneath, smaller, "Check the back of the old photo frame." I looked up. Callan mouthed the words, "You were never crazy," then closed her window before her mother could catch her. Back at the apartment, I didn't rush. I took my time removing the old frame from the shelf. It held a photo of Dad and me, one of the last taken before he passed. The back was sealed with yellowed tape. I peeled it away slowly, my hands steady. Tucked behind the photo was a flash drive, nothing else. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop with a hand steadier than I expected. There was only one file, an audio recording, about 22 seconds long, no label, no metadata, just silence for the first few seconds, then Valora's voice, unmistakable, amused and sharp. "She thought the numbers were for a soup recipe," she said, followed by a soft laugh. "Idiot doesn't even know she picked her own lottery goodbye." I stared at the screen, my jaw locked so tight it ached. Every syllable dug into me like splinters. The words weren't angry. They weren't even cruel. They were dismissive, smug, confident that I'd never hear them. But I had. The next morning, I made an appointment with Leora. She'd once been a friend, then a distant connection. And now, after all this, she was the only person I trusted with truth that burned too hot to hold alone. Her office was quiet, tucked above a bakery in East Sacramento. She wore a gray blazer and no makeup, just as I remembered. She didn't ask how I was. She just nodded toward the chair across from her desk. I handed her the drive. She listened, twice, without speaking. When the audio ended, she sat back, folded her hands, and said, "Well, that's not just betrayal. That's perjury and asset concealment." I blinked. "What happens now?" "I'll file. Not for money, unless you want it, but for disclosure. Fraud during divorce settlement. We can file for public release of the audio, and if we time it right—" Her voice trailed off as she opened her calendar. "They're attending that big fundraiser for the Halden Foundation this Thursday, right?" I nodded slowly. She smiled. "Then we won't need a courtroom. We'll let the court of public opinion do its job first." That Thursday evening, I stood across the street from the ballroom entrance of the city's grandest hotel. Cars pulled up in front, black, polished, faceless. Corwin and Valora were expected to speak during the event, which was being live-streamed. Inside, I'd arranged for a small speaker to be patched into the building's media loop. It wasn't hacking, it was legal, barely, but enough. The file had been embedded into the event's pre-roll with the help of someone from Leora's team. At 7:41 p.m., right as Valora stepped on stage to deliver her opening remarks, the lights dimmed. Then her voice rang out, her real voice. She thought the numbers were for a soup recipe. Idiot doesn't even know she picked her own lottery goodbye. There was a beat of silence, then murmurs, then the flick of phones going up. The event's host tried to recover, but the audience was already buzzing. Someone gasped. A wine glass shattered somewhere in the back. Corwin was caught on camera, face paling, mouth opening like he might speak, but he didn't. Valora froze. Then, like someone had slapped her, she turned sharply and walked off stage. I didn't stay to watch the aftermath in person. I'd positioned myself just far enough to see the reaction through the lobby glass, but not be seen. By the time the security team and PR staff swarmed the area, I was already heading down the sidewalk, hands in my coat pockets. Behind me, Corwin chased after Valora, their shadows stretching long beneath the streetlights. They didn't see me. Outside the hotel doors, I passed a granite planter and reached into my bag. I pulled out the old photo frame, the one with my picture inside, the one that had hidden the truth all this time. I knelt down, placed it gently on the stone edge, then I stood and walked away. I didn't look back when it fell, glass shattering against the concrete. Some things are meant to break, so others can breathe again. The frame shattered behind me, but I didn't flinch. I just kept walking, past the valet circle, past the polished hotel doors, until the noise of murmurs and camera shutters faded behind me. Sacramento's night air was cool and quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't empty, but full of clarity. Over the next few weeks, the media did what media does. Headlines spun, stories shifted, but one thing stayed constant. People stopped calling Corwin a hero. Sponsors pulled out. His investment partners paused involvement. Valora's name vanished from 3 PR lists and 2 brand campaigns. Public apologies were posted in perfectly edited paragraphs on their joint social channels. But they weren't sorry. Not really. And that's what made it easier to walk away from the mess, from the chaos they tried to drop in my lap. I didn't respond. I didn't sue for damages. I didn't grant interviews. I said nothing. Instead, I agreed to something smaller, something real. A women's center on the east side of town had reached out to me. Leora passed them my name after someone from the staff saw a clip of the fundraiser audio leak online. They asked if I'd be willing to speak, not to tell my story like gossip, but to share how I rebuilt. It felt strange, standing in front of a folding table in a room that smelled like coffee and recycled paper, wearing slacks I hadn't pulled from the back of my closet in a year. The crowd wasn't big, maybe 20 women, a few staff, a counselor scribbling notes in the back. But when I started talking, they listened. I didn't share names. I didn't bring up headlines or court filings. I just talked about losing everything I thought made me valuable, and then realizing that the things that mattered weren't ever gone. I thought being erased was the worst thing that could happen to me, I said quietly. But sometimes, when you're erased, what's left is the truth. And that truth becomes the foundation for something stronger. I pulled out the card my father had written me, his last birthday message, stored in my inbox until I needed it. I read it aloud, just once. You are not invisible. When I finished, there wasn't applause, just silence. A warm kind, the kind that says, I've been there too. After the event, while sipping decaf in the kitchenette, Callan slipped in. She wrapped her arms around me without a word, just pressed her cheek against my shoulder and held on. No hiding, no hesitation, just truth. Across the room, Vera stood near the door. She didn't come in, but she didn't leave either. Our eyes met for a second. She gave a small nod, something between a gesture of regret and permission. Then she turned and walked away. Later that night, I walked home. No car, just a canvas tote slung over one arm, heels in hand, the soles of my feet aching against the pavement. The stars were faint above the city haze, but I could still make out the Big Dipper. My dad taught me to find it when I was 7. I stopped, tilted my head up, and smiled. Not because everything was okay, but because for the first time I wasn't pretending. I passed a storefront window and caught my reflection. The same coat, the same hair, the same tired eyes, but something was different. I stepped closer, watching how the glass shifted my silhouette slightly. The woman staring back at me didn't look like someone who had been broken. She looked like someone who had been rebuilt. You may not recognize me now, I whispered to the woman in the window, but I've been here all along. Sometimes it's not about getting back what was taken from you, but remembering what they could never steal to begin with: your voice, your truth, your resilience. Have you ever been made to feel invisible by the people closest to you? How did you find your way back to yourself? If this story moved you or made you reflect on your own journey, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful, true-to-life family stories that stay with you long after the screen fades to black.